Please welcome on stage Saygin Yalcin.
Philipp.
Saygin, schön, dass du da bist.
Danke. Mir wurde gesagt, ich soll auf Englisch reden.
Nein, auf Deutsch.
Kann aber.
Kannst du auch.
Jetzt ist schon alles auf Englisch. So,
Wie du
anybody
möchtest.
who doesn't speak English, please leave the room. So I got a call some time ago from a friend, and he said, Saygin, you know a good lawyer? I said, why? He said, my lawyer got arrested. I said, what do you mean your lawyer got arrested? How does your lawyer get arrested? He said, well, the police called me. They said, please come to the station. And he said, oh, can I bring my lawyer? Police said, yeah, bring your lawyer as well. So he went to the police station, and then the police officer was sitting here at the desk with a screen, and he said, do you know this guy? He said, yeah, that's my lawyer. So, and the police guy said, that's not a lawyer. So why I'm telling you this is because I'm going to tell you how to win. And how to win basically means how to become powerful. And power is something we need to analyze. Because what I say when I talk about power, I mean to be able to change things, to enforce change. And not to only be able to be outraged without any consequences. So I analyzed power. And I said, who were the most powerful people in the history of mankind? At least for the past few thousand years. So I looked into the rankings, and 41% of those people were some kind of politically active leaders. The second most powerful people in history, they were active in science, 21% of those. And then religious leaders, philosophers, entrepreneurs, and so on. So, okay. So in order to be powerful nowadays, how many of those areas are actually still available for us? So I don't think anybody of you wants to become a religious leader nowadays. It's very difficult. Strong competition. Unless we have the next Jesus here or somewhere, but I don't think it's going to happen. So when I look at this list, I said there is only 3 areas left. Politics, science, and entrepreneurs. So I'm going to tell you, because I'm one of those. You can judge if I'm a politician or scientist, but I'm more an entrepreneur, and I want to convince you, and I might be talking or preaching to the converted, but I want to convert you into entrepreneurs if you're not already so. But let's say you want to be powerful in politics. Let's go through all those 3 areas. So I said, what makes you powerful in politics? So then I analyzed the US presidential campaigns. And I said, how much did they spend to become the US president? And then you can see that the ones who had the most money usually win the elections. There's only 2 exceptions. Obama's re-election campaign, but he was already president, so it's easier, and he only had slightly less money. And Donald Trump, but he had a lot of free earned media. But usually the ones with the highest budgets win the elections. Fine. Seems like money is important in politics. What about science? I said, is it important to have money? How big is this stage? By the way, I can walk this way. How important is it to have money in science? So I analyzed something. I said, let's look at the Nobel Prize winners in history, where they came from, and how much those countries spend in research and development. And you see, the countries who spend most in research and development, on the left side, usually produce more Nobel Prize winners, which is an indication that they might be influential scientists. And countries who spend less as a percentage of GDP, PPP, you'll see they'll produce less Nobel Prize winners. Okay, so what about the third area? The third area is entrepreneurship. So Anna said, is it important to have money in entrepreneurship? So I looked at the 700 most valuable companies which were started in the past 10 years. And I looked at the amount of money they've received and compared it to their valuation. And we have over 76% correlation between the money a company receives and its valuation. While correlation is not causality, it gives us an indication that being able to persuade people to invest into your companies makes you stronger in entrepreneurship. So then I said, okay, all those three areas seem to have a common denominator: strong financial backing. But then how do I convince and persuade investors? And I think this is something which will be the core of my presentation today, because they told me I should tell you everything I've learned in the past 10 years in 15 minutes. So I'm going to do this quick. You only have to remember those two words: evidence and story. If you want to convince investors, you have to be able to convince your customers. If your customers love you, investors will eventually too. So how do you convince customers? Is with evidence and story. So what does that even mean? I mean, you obviously know what an evidence is. Basically something you believe because it seems true. This is evidence. There's three realities in this world. One reality is the objective truth, which basically means it's true if you believe it or not. It's based on the scientific method, it's based on logic. But there are also two other realities you can create, and they don't necessarily have to be true. One is something what I call media reality. You only have to repeat excessively the same things over and over again, and it seems true. This is something what we call cognitive ease. This is what companies do with their slogans. They tell you all the time the same things until you believe it. And the other part is an individual reality. It could be true for you because you believe the guy who tells you, because he appeals to your emotions. So now that we understand how you can create evidence which is not necessarily true, you have one part of the equation. Now, what is the other equation for story within your customers? With customers, it's important that you understand that emotions and feelings beat facts. So everybody knows, without even looking at the graph, that the higher the price for a product, the less you will sell. But there's an area We call this the monopolistic area, where you can charge more for your products, but you will not lose proportional demand because the customers are acting irrationally. They have bounded rationality. So when you want to increase that green area, that monopolistic area where you can maximize your profits, you have to be able to tell an appealing story. Now that you've convinced your customers, you can start convincing your investors. However, with investors, you also have evidence and story, but we call this data and a narrative. Investors are convinced by you giving them data and showing them momentum. And on the other hand, you tell a story, which is the narrative. So as you might know, in the past decade, the narrative was around, let's grow. Let's build hyper-growing companies. Let's forget about profitability. Let's just grow. You've seen a lot of tech companies this year who have felt the truth. We had the worst start since the stock exchange was opened. It's the worst start to a year since 80 years, as far as I can tell. We have tech companies dropping 65 to 95% in valuations because the narrative has changed. The evidence they are producing has changed and has to change. So if you're looking to build a startup in this climate, you have to understand that the data you're going to present is going to be around free cash flow and the narrative of how you can build a viable business. Because venture capital will make the good things better, but the bad things even worse. Venture capital will make things bigger, not better. And this is probably the most important year in tech which we have had in the past 10 years. If you start a startup this year, your narrative, your evidence, and your story has to change. So now I know we have a very international crowd. So some of you might say, well, where do I start this company? So I analyzed this as well, and I said, where is it most likely that we will start a unicorn? A company which is worth more than $1 billion. You might see that the US and China produce most unicorns, but the likelihood of you starting a unicorn in those countries is not even 20% of countries such as India and Israel, while only 9 or 4 companies in 1 million registered businesses in the US and China produce unicorns. 20 in 1 million companies in India and Israel become unicorns. So I hope I could actually change your perspective on how you look at venture capital and how you start a business and how you can raise money for your companies. It's not always in those superstar countries for tech VC. Thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Perfektes Timing.
Absolut. Krass, du bist einfach Profi. Mittlerweile bist du nicht nur Profi-Unternehmer, sondern auch Profi-Keynote-Redner. Wahnsinn.